Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our program tonight. And we are back in session. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Hello, Markeisha. Welcome to another night of Mom's Night In with Faith-Filled Moms. I am your host, Tanya May Event. Welcome. Hello, Markeisha.
Hi, I disappeared there for a minute.
I got a little, I didn't say scared, but I was like, what happened to Markeisha?
I'm checking on the live stream. I'm like, oh, let's keep them going.
Yes, we had some issues last weekend, so we hope
did.
we don't have a repeat of that tonight. But welcome.
I hope not.
Welcome to another Mom's Night In. We will make it through regardless. So thank you so much for joining. If you are here with us today, jump on the chat, say hello. Let us know who's here, where you're joining
Absolutely.
from. We'd love to say hi. I see Sheila.
Well,
hi, Sheila. Hey. Welcome from Georgia. Welcome back. We love to see your name up on the screen. Thank you for being with us. One of the people we typically see first coming to say hello is Carmen May.
Yes.
But she is in the hospital. I was visiting with her earlier today, so we want to give a shout out. I don't know if she's watching now. More than likely, it'll probably be a replay. But Carmen, we want to say hello. We're praying for you, and we love you, and we miss you tonight. So we hope you are well. All right. So
yes,
we are in full swing. I think at this point, every state should be back to school. All of our kids are back to school. So we are in the grind now. We are doing it.
Yes, we are.
How's your new school and your new job going?
You got to establish dominance early with the boys. Ooh. It's coming along. It's coming along. It's coming along. They're not bad. They're not bad at all. Let me knock on wood. I'm looking forward to the year. We've got a bunch of them who are going to get ready to go home. So let's
give some background to our viewers. So Markeisha has been in public school, and she surprised us over the summer of something she's been praying for. But God blessed her with a new job, a very impactful job. So Markeisha, share a little bit about what you're doing now.
I am now the science teacher at the Ferris School for Boys in Wilmington, level 4 correctional facility in the state of Delaware. So I get to teach the young men that unfortunately have their life choices have put them in incarceration. They usually stay about 6 to 9 months. But yeah, and they're usually the kids that are not successful in school.
Mm-hmm.
They are the kids that some of them are super smart, but it's like if you could only use your powers for good, not evil. Just based on their circumstances and everything. And then there's some that have, some learning disabilities that you're like, yeah, you need a little bit of help. But I get to sit with them one-on-one. I was surprised. I get to actually do some direct instruction.
Mm-hmm.
But because they are who they are, you can't do too much of that.
Okay.
Just imagine a group of that kid that was on 10. You only had 1 or 2 of those in your classroom before. Imagine
the whole class.
Like 10 of them.
Yeah,
it's 10 of them, and they're with you. But they're not bad at all. So I'll be there for a couple of years.
Yeah,
And
well, we're
then I'll
excited.
be, yes, I am. And then I'll be in the Shady Acres home
Then you'll
for
be
the
retired.
retired teachers.
Nicely retired. So we are excited about this change for you, and we are obviously always keeping you in prayer and praying that you make an impact in that school. So
Amen.
again, thank you so much, those for joining us. We have a great show. If you joined us last week, you know that we are in our new season, season 4, and a new series about premature birth and NICU stay. So we have moms featured all week. I'm sorry, all month who have had premature birth stories that they are sharing with us. And tonight's guest is a special guest, and I cannot wait to bring her in. I have known her for a long time. She, like Markeisha and I, is a fellow University of Delaware Blue Hen. And so I am just always excited when someone from my younger years gets to come back on, because a lot of times you don't always know the story that somebody's been through. You've known them through the years, but did not know the story that they've been through. So I'm really excited and honored to be able to share her story. So if you know someone who may have experienced or has experienced and in the midst of a premature birth, NICU, or just really any situation that they are really needing to trust God for, please share this stream with them, invite them to join us. We would love to have them. So Markeisha, I'm going to say goodbye to you, and I'm going to go ahead and bring out our guest for tonight. I'll see you later.
Right.
So our guest tonight is LynNae Hill. Good evening, LynNae. How are you doing today?
Good evening. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. So like I said, LynNae and I think we probably met freshman year. I want to say, because we're both the same class. But it was in the 90s, we'll just say. It was
we're not the same class.
When did you graduate? When did you come out?
I came out in 98. I'm a little bit
You are
younger.
2 years then. Yeah, I'm 96. Yeah. Okay, so 2 years behind, but our paths did cross at University of Delaware. And then years later at Victory in Christ Christian Center, we met up again, and we've seen each other throughout in church and in the same neighborhood pretty much now as well. And I've watched her beautiful family grow. And like I said, just knowing you from school and from church and not really even knowing your full story. And I know that's one of the great things I like about this ministry is we get to talk about some topics that we typically don't normally share with each other, because a lot of the topics that we talk about can be personal sometimes, of a personal nature. But we love to bring them out to be able to share what God is doing, and sometimes in those deep places, in those dark places, in those hard places. So your story, I want to say I knew about your premature birth because you were always an advocate for March of Dimes. I remember probably early, even in social media, but you were very much of an advocate. I remember you would advocate for fundraising for March of Dimes. And I didn't even think I knew which child, had been born prematurely, but I just knew that you were one who was advocating for that. So it was a blessing to hear your story. But I just want to ask you to go ahead, introduce yourself to our guests. Just say a little bit about who you are, what you do, your family, and then we'll get right into your story.
Okay. My name's LynNae Hill. I live in New Jersey with my family of 5. We are Team Hill, Party of 5.
Party of 5.
My husband and my 3 kids. So, and after you hear today's story, you might be a little bit surprised to hear that, yes, there was a third, because that almost didn't happen. But my son, EJ, who is 16, he is a junior in high school. My daughter, Eliana, who goes by Ellie, will be kind of the highlight of our story today, is 15. She's a sophomore. And my youngest is Alicia, and she is 9. And she is a new 4th grader. And I'm a high school counselor. So kind of in the same field a little bit of Markeisha, also an educator and working with some of our more troubled youth, more needy youth. So that's me.
You're so humble. She's an amazing counselor as well. And I think are you a school board member as well now too?
I am, yes. I actually am on the board in our town. I've been on the board, I want to say it's been like about 11 years now, actually, since EJ was in kindergarten, so quite some time.
So she's an advocate, a fierce advocate for education as well. So again, thank you so much for joining us. So if this is your first time joining Faith-Filled Moms, I just want to share our mission with you. We are a community of moms, and we provide biblical and emotional support, and content to bring hope, encouragement, and inspiration to women facing difficult seasons in life. And every month we face what we call a difficult season in life. And in this month, we're featuring and discussing and sharing about premature birth and just what our moms experienced that during that period of time, some of the challenges, some of the fears, and really how they were able to get through them through faith, through support, and whatever got them through. We know that God is always in the center of that. So we just love sharing their stories to hopefully inspire you, again, for whatever situation. Yours might not be premature birth or whatever your story is. I pray that LynNae's story tonight will help you get through and face whatever it is that you are going through. So I'm going to open us up in prayer and then we'll get right started. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you so much for another Tuesday, another Mom's Night In. I thank you for the honor and privilege to be able to bring LynNae's story to our guests, God. We just pray that you would be with us tonight during this conversation and just lead and guide our words, our thoughts. Lord, you know who's watching live. You know who's going to watch in the future. You know what they need to hear, God. So we pray that you would just use us, speak through us to be encouragement to someone else. Please be with all of our technology. Allow everything to work exactly as it should, and that you would always get the glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, so LynNae's full story will be published tomorrow on Faithful Moms, our website, faithfulmoms.org. So if you have not done so already, please sign up, leave us your email address, and you will get a notification first thing in the morning with the link to her story. And again, if you have not done so, if you know someone who needs encouragement tonight, we just ask you to share this link with them, invite them for some inspiration and encouragement tonight. So we're going to get right into LynNae's story. Again, this is only a little bit of her story. The full story will be in her blog tomorrow. So LynNae, let's start off with you and your husband, Ed. Hi, Ed, if you're watching. Wanting to start your family. Talk about how your family started, and then I would say this unexpected pregnancy with Eliana as well.
Yeah, so we married in 2006, in October of 2006, and I pretty much wanted to start right away. We got married what I would feel was a little bit later. I was just before I turned 30 is when we got married, and he's a couple months younger than me. So, I'm like, by 30, I should be having a family. I should be doing all these, we all have a timeline.
Your
so
timeline.
I'm like, okay, let's speed this up a little bit. We got married a couple months later. We were pregnant with EJ. Everything went, I would say relatively fine with EJ. It was pretty much a low intensity birth. I don't want to get too much into that story because that's a whole nother story, but there was a small issue when he was born, but he was born at like a smaller hospital, like a birthing center type hospital that we have in the area. I was able to have a midwife with him because, I had all these ideas about, what birth should be, what natural birth should be. That was my big thing. And so EJ ended up being the closest to natural birth that I would get. And then, we're living life as family of 3 with our, little toddler and everything was great. And, one day, because I was a nursing mom too, I nursed her for quite some time. And so I didn't really have like my regular cycles, but, no big deal because I'm nursing. So it's not going to be regular. And one day I was at a women's conference at church. And that night I was like, I don't feel great. I don't feel right. Like something feels weird. And my husband and I laughed and he's like, you can't be pregnant, are you? And I'm like, yeah, right. Because I'm busy running around after EJ. Nobody's thinking about being pregnant. And if you know how it is being a mom, being tired and everything, like all the stuff that needs to be happening wasn't even really happening for that. So I'm like, no, I'm not pregnant, but we just couldn't get it out of our minds. So I took a test and lo and behold, I found out that I was pregnant. And at that time when I found out, I believe EJ I think it was like November. I think it was November. So he was about 11 months old.
Okay.
And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be a mom to 2 under 2. Like just everything just happened like that, married, boom. Mom, boom. Now I'm going to be a mom to 2 under 2, and I'm still figuring out just this one. So yeah, it was quite a surprise, and she has not stopped surprising us since then.
So with that, and we're going to get in that because you mentioned something we'll talk about. So just remind me, we talked about being a mom to different children. You're a different mom to each one. So I remember when we had our initial prep, we talked about it, and I was like, oh, that's good. So make sure we talk about that later in the show. But with that, so you are a new mom to EJ and expecting. So you obviously go for prenatal care. So I want to ask you what happens during that. There's a visit you have with an anatomy scan during your first trimester. Talk about that visit, what happened, and how you and your husband responded.
So, so I had like like an anatomy scan, you know, where they're checking the body parts of the fetus and all that stuff like that. And they noticed what they thought to be called rocker bottom feet. And that kind of sat with me because I'm like, what is that? Like, what does that mean? What are we talking about here? And I was told that rocker bottom feet can be an indicator of a trisomy. Like there are several different trisomies, and it could indicate maybe one of those trisomies. And for those of you who don't know what a trisomy is, I'll just give you the most common example. Down syndrome is a trisomy. And that's one of the most common, and one that usually the prognosis is somewhat, you know, is decent. Children with Down syndrome, as we know, can live for a very long time, become adults, and some of them function very well in society. But there are other trisomies that are a lot more severe.
Okay.
Yeah, that, you know, unfortunately, some of those children don't make it to birth or don't make it very long past birth. And I was told that, you know, there was a very high possibility that she could have one of those. So obviously that was terrifying, to say the least. And like I said, you know, that was probably the first of surprises with her. Well, after finding out that I was pregnant, what I didn't plan for. And then there was that. And, you know, then we were just like, oh, okay, so what's next? Like, what do we do? You know? And they told us, well, the only way that we can, you know, fully confirm whether or not that she has one of these trisomies is to do an amniocentesis. And I kind of didn't like, you know, those odds. I wasn't really feeling that. You know, I know that we're in a more modern time, and there's been a lot of involvement, I guess, in those areas. But I still felt like there was a lot of risk involved with amniocentesis that we just weren't really willing to take. We weren't really willing to take that risk. And we both also felt, you know, even if we get the amnio and we find out that she does have, you know, this life-threatening trisomy, what would we do with that information? Would it change anything? And we knew that it wouldn't. So it was kind of like, well, then what's the point? You know, we knew that we were going to do whatever we could do with the time that we had with that child. So it didn't really make a difference. And so we decided against getting the amniocentesis. So, you know, we were a little bit unsure. But at my next ultrasound, when they like repeated all the measurements and everything, they're like, okay, her feet look fine. She doesn't have the rocker bottom feet. Okay, great. That's wonderful. But now we see that you have what's called placenta previa. Okay, what is that? I didn't know anything about that either.
And I was sharing, before you go with that, I was sharing, you know, as I'm reading through this, I know when I was pregnant, it was what to expect when you're expecting was my guide. Like, we didn't Google, you know, so now you get any diagnosis at all. You can go on Google, you can find all the other details. But back then we really didn't have that. So a lot of the things doctors would tell us, we had no clue. We didn't know what to expect or anything. But I just thought that was interesting. Like, we would read more. There were some baby websites, but for the most part, you don't have all the information knowledge that you have now.
No, definitely not as much. And, you know, I didn't have a frame of reference. I didn't know anybody who had been through that. And, you know, I think you and I talked about, if my doctors didn't tell me about it and it wasn't, you know, readily available to me, I didn't know. And so it was explained to me that part of my
We lost
Oh.
you. Go ahead. I heard
Okay.
part of your consent. Yeah.
Was covering my cervix, and that it was essentially blocking the baby's passageway, the exit route,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. And so, I was told that there's a possibility that it could move, it could migrate, and then you'd be able to have a vaginal birth. Because for me, it was huge. I wanted to have a vaginal birth. I'd had a vaginal birth with my son. Like I said, his was the most normal birth that I had, vaginal, unmedicated, and that's
Mm-hmm.
the experience that I wanted to have again. So it was very important to me to want to have a vaginal birth, but I had to be monitored closely, and checked regularly. And with my son, I had a midwife, and I had
Mm-hmm.
him, like I said, in that birthing center style hospital. I was told, we can't do this with a midwife,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't do it in the birthing center type hospital because, if there are any complications, you need to be in a hospital that has a NICU,
Yes.
a level 3 NICU.
Yeah, I would say all the support that you would need in case of a medical
Right,
emergency. So let me
right.
ask you, you are at this point, you have two, I think, pretty kind of life-rocking diagnoses
Mm-hmm.
through your pregnancy. So what is your mental state? What is your emotional state? How are you getting through this? Who are you reaching out to? Like, how are you handling? Because of course, a pregnancy, 9 months, 8 months, however many, you're waiting. So during this wait, you have this baby inside of you, and you're hearing diagnoses about your baby. So how are you handling this during that time? Like, how are you handling these diagnoses?
Definitely there was a lot of prayer, and my husband and I, a lot of just like leaning on each other
Mm-hmm.
and just really, trusting God. Because I felt like there was nothing else that we could do.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't anything that I could do. And as mothers, we like to try to be problem solvers, right? We like to try to figure things
To have the
out.
answer, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to have the answers. And I, I didn't have any answers, and there was no way that I was going to be able to fix this. I couldn't make my placenta move, you know. So I just had to trust God,
Had
and
to
we had to
pray,
lean on each
yeah.
other, and like this is going to be okay one way or the other. And at that point, um, I didn't, I wasn't as worried because I said, okay, so she doesn't have trisomy. That's the best
Mhm.
thing,
Mhm.
This can't be that bad. The worst case scenario is I might have to have a C-section. I can deal with that. It's not what I wanted, but I might have to have a scheduled C-section.
Right.
And that's how it was explained to me, if it doesn't move, we just move forward with a scheduled C-section. That's it. Everything will be fine. Yeah, and they didn't really go into, my doctor didn't really go into
Mhm.
worst case scenario,
Mhm.
which may or may not have been good because worst case scenario happened, unfortunately. So I don't want to jump too far ahead, but
No, go ahead. You can continue.
yeah, so I
I was
was
going to
not
ask, my next question is going
prepared.
to ask you when you woke up. So, in your third trimester, well, I'll answer that. In your third trimester, as I remember reading, you were planning, right? I think were your doctors planning, making plans early in the third trimester, you had some things that were scheduled. So talk about, because your placenta didn't move, what were the preparations the medical team was making for, and
Yes,
preparing you for
thank you.
delivery?
So at the point in which the placenta didn't move, so I was scheduled for the C-section. It was supposed to be, I was supposed to be delivered at 37 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So she was due late July, and I was supposed to be delivered at 37 weeks. But prior to that scheduled delivery date, I was to go into the hospital and have steroid injections to help to develop her lungs, because babies that are born, before that time, typically their lungs are underdeveloped and they have difficulty with breathing and everything else. So all of that was scheduled, everything was set. And I didn't make it to the date of the scheduled steroid injections. Unfortunately, I woke up on Sunday morning, June 14th. I remember it was a Sunday morning, like it was yesterday, because we're waking up, getting ready to go to church like we normally did.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I felt something felt wrong. And I felt like a wetness. And I looked down and I saw a large amount of blood. Again, being mom, I kind of calmly nudged my husband and said, "Hey, you got to get up. Something's going on here, And so he got up, it was first thing in the morning. Our son wasn't awake or anything like that. And, he started getting him ready while I called my doctor, because my doctor did say, if anything happens, call me. So I called her as I'm getting my son's diaper bag together, still being a mom to a toddler. I wasn't worried about me so much, or even.
So there was no concern at that point with the blood. Like, you're just like, were you worried about anything at that point, or was there any idea what was going on?
I mean, I would say that I was slightly concerned, but I don't think that I had the level of urgency that I probably should have. That's why I say that maybe it's good and maybe it's not so good that they didn't prepare me for a worst case scenario.
Right.
Because I didn't freak out. But I just knew that, this is not right. Maybe if they had said, if you're bleeding heavily, do not pass go, do not collect $200. They didn't say any of that.
Right.
So I thought, I got plenty of time, and my son hasn't had a diaper change. My son hasn't been fed. Those are the things that were going through my mind.
Your morning routine, right? Your regular morning routine you got to go through.
Yeah. And I can't leave for the hospital without him having a diaper, right? I can't take my son in a dirty diaper. So I got to figure all that out. So I was doing all that, making all the preparations while I was waiting for the doctor to call me back. And she did call me back rather quickly. So then I kind of knew, like, wait a minute, this might really be urgent. And she says, you need to get to the hospital right away. And do you think your husband will be able to drive you? If he can't drive you, you need to go by ambulance because you need to get here now. So I told my husband, like, okay, let's go. Now let's wrap it up. Let's go.
Yeah.
So hopped in the car, and I shared with Tanya, because we live near each other. The hospital where I was headed, it's not very close by any stretch, and it's not on the highway or anything like that. So it's just it seemed like a forever drive on these back roads and everything to the hospital. And everything after that is mostly a blur. I remember speaking to the doctor very briefly, and she just reassured me, and she says, we're going to get you back there right away. And the next thing I know, I was out, and later I woke up and I was told I had a baby. Wow. And that was pretty much it. And she wasn't there in the room. Again, it wasn't like my son where, we were in the same room together. She wasn't there. I didn't see her. I didn't lay eyes on her. I was just told, she's okay, but she's in the NICU. And then I found out that what had happened was I had experienced placental abruption. So that's when the placenta actually tears away from the uterine wall. And that was the cause of the bleeding. And it can be very dangerous. It can be very deadly, actually. And one thing that I shared with Tanya, and this is why I say that some of you may be surprised after hearing my story that there was a number 3, because the doctor said to my husband, and I think she was trying to say it like kind of as a good job, like as a pat on the back, did a good job. But she said to him that if we had gotten there even a few minutes later, that he would have lost one or both of us wouldn't have made it. I think that's how she worded it. And that stays with him forever. He still talks about it now. Because he was terrified.
Yeah.
He was terrified to hear that. I almost lost my wife and or my baby. I could have been a single dad, like all those things that went through his mind. So
but God. That's, again, someone and you have no idea their story, not knowing any of that. And one of the things I thought was very interesting when I was writing your summary out, I remember typing, you had unwavering faith through the difficulties. And I said, wait a minute, I don't want to put that, because I know a lot of times we say that, but I think our faith does waver. You know what I mean? I think sometimes we stand in faith, but we still have doubt. And I don't want people to feel bad if they do have moments of doubt while standing in their faith. I think it's very normal, myself as well, where you're believing God, but sometimes you still question God, like why God or when, and you question some of those things. So I just, you know, your faith walk. And again, I know we had some, Christian families and friends that were rallying around you, but talk about, did you waver? And if you experience waivers of questioning God or doubting God, even after she's born in the NICU, how did you deal with those emotions that you were feeling and those thoughts?
I think, to be honest, I wavered the most probably with the potential diagnoses of the trisomies. Just, like I said, I was a mom to a toddler already, and just like, God, like if this is, this is what our family is going to be dealing with, like, can I handle this? Can we handle this? I'm still figuring out just how to be a mom in general, because, he was only at the time when we found out the diagnosis, he might have been maybe 13 months. He was just a little thing himself. So I'm still figuring everything out. I was still nursing him at that time. In fact, I stopped nursing him at 15 months just so I could get a little bit of a break before the next one came.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's probably the time when my faith was really tested the most. Like I said, we did have to lean on God and trust in him because we knew that we didn't want to do the amnio. We didn't want to, just take that risk, however small it might have been. Like we didn't want to roll the dice.
Yeah.
So we had to trust, but it was also kind of like, but why? Like, why are we facing this? Why
questioning at the same time?
Yeah.
So talk about, as she's in the NICU now, that's interesting. As I'm reading each of the stories for this month, everyone's NICU, I think, transition is different of the baby going to the NICU. So you wake up and she's already gone. So talk about you finding out, seeing her for the first time in NICU, and what that NICU experience was like with her.
Yeah. So, the first time was after several hours, because, you wake up after an emergency C-section where I had been under, like, I was in recovery. You know what I mean? I couldn't just pop up and say, let me go see my baby. Again, in contrast to my son, he was born at, I labored with him all night long. He was born at 6:38 in the morning. So I fell asleep. And as soon as I woke up, I got up and I'm walking down the hall like nothing, no big deal. I couldn't do that because my body had to physically, recover. So it was several hours before I was even able to go to visit her in the NICU. I had to be wheeled down in a wheelchair and everything else. And, you finally get there and there's all this, anxiety and anticipation. And then you just see your child, tiny little thing, to me, tiny. And I know there's other NICU moms that maybe were on last week and will be on after me that maybe even had smaller. She was 4 pounds, 9 ounces. But EJ was 8 too. So she was almost half his size. So to me, she was just this tiny little thing. And she's just wrapped in all these cords and tubes and all these machines beeping. And it's so surreal. Like, I felt like it was like an out of body experience. You know what I mean? I could not hold her immediately. I could just look and cry and just be like in shock, I could talk to her, but, excuse me. Yeah. And then even in the following days, again, your body doesn't just snap back after an emergency C-section. So as much as everybody's telling me, you need to rest, you need to recover, my legs were swelling up and all kinds of things were going on in my body. But my mind was saying, but I'm a mom.
Yeah.
And I need to be.
And my daughter's in the NICU.
Child.
Yeah.
Right. So I was going back and forth to the NICU all day long instead of staying in my hospital room. And then even, when I was discharged, I would only go home to sleep because I couldn't sleep in the NICU as much as I wanted to. They would let me. So I would go home to sleep and to be a mom to EJ. And then first thing in the morning, I would get up, somebody would drive me. My mother-in-law would drop me off to the hospital. I would stay there all day, doing the kangaroo care. And then when she finally stepped down, because she was in the incubator, and then they stepped down to like the open air bassinet. Then we were working on nursing. After she got her suck swallow reflexes, we were working on nursing. And again, that didn't come as easily with her as it did with EJ.
Yeah. So you're comparing almost your experience almost with her, everything that you knew as a mom and experienced as a mom with EJ, you're not experiencing that with her.
And just like you said, the thing we said we were going to get back to, we can get back to it now. Like, I was no longer a new mom, but I say this all the time, and I share this with Tanya, and this is what she wanted me to share with all of you. I even say, even now, like, you may not, everybody makes a big deal out of when you have your first baby, you're a new mom, but I say you're a new mom all the time, because even though I wasn't a new mom anymore, I had 2 kids now, but now I was a new mom to a NICU baby.
Yeah.
I was a new mom to a baby who didn't naturally know how to nurse. With EJ, no big deal. We nursed right away. Later, I'll share some other things that were new to me. And even now, I'm a new mom to a junior in high school who's learning how to drive, I'm a new mom.
Whole nother world.
Exactly. Like
new worries. Yeah.
Yes. New worries, new life experiences, trying to navigate a new frame of reference. I didn't have one. I didn't know anybody else who had a baby in the NICU. I didn't have anybody that I felt like I could talk to, or a community. So I was just trying to figure this all out and still be a mom to my toddler,
Yeah, I love that. I think when we talked before, you just shared the reason you were so committed to March of Dimes was because you remembered how you felt, and not having that community, and wanting to make sure that other moms that experienced that did know that they were supported, and did know that someone had been where they were, and wanting them to not have the same experience that you had had.
Yeah. And also it was just a way for me to kind of like work through the trauma, because it is trauma. The whole birth experience was traumatic. And, and even today, it's 15 years later, even today, I still get choked up, a little bit talking about it. Like I said, none of us, we all have like this idea in our mind of how it's supposed to go. And nothing with this girl went the way it was supposed to go, and just kind of figuring out how to deal with, when life throws you all these curveballs, what are you going to do? And how are you going to process that?
Yeah. And I think another commonality that you mentioned earlier, that again, as I'm preparing and reviewing the stories for this month, is that all of the babies in the NICU have to pass a series of tests to be released from the NICU. So talk even about that, like how long she was in the NICU, and you and your husband waiting and praying for her to be able to meet all those milestones, to be able to go home.
Yeah. So she ultimately was in the NICU about 2 weeks. And again, one thing that I learned, because I'm always like, well, she wasn't in there that long. Well, she wasn't that early, like when you ask me to be on the show, well, there's other people that have stories that are, more traumatic than mine. Like, why do you want to hear from me? But I was reminded that, my testimony could be a testimony that somebody else needs to hear. Maybe somebody else is dealing with their baby only being in there 2 weeks. It's still a story, and it's still an experience. So
like said,
she was in there 2 weeks.
It's still a traumatic experience that you had too,
Yeah.
And I don't discount that. Yeah.
I do. So I have to learn not to.
Exactly.
But she had to be able to develop her lungs well enough to be in the open air breathing, like I said. So she was in the incubator until she could, breathe strongly enough to be in open air breathing. And then the feeding until she was able to develop her suck swallow reflexes and actually feed on her own. She was fed through a tube, so that had to come out. So all those things had to happen. Her body had to be able to regulate its temperature.
Temperature.
Was another thing before she could come out of the incubator. She had to be able to regulate the temperature. And then, just learning to, after she was off the tube, learning to nurse, because I really wanted to nurse. That was very important for me. And again, it didn't come as naturally.
And that's frustrating. You know what I mean? Yeah, that is very frustrating.
I remember I had to get like the nipple shields and all these little extra contraptions and all these things just to try to make it work. But eventually we got it to work, and she started gaining weight. So that's another, test that they have to pass. They have to gain weight. And then the final, and most NICU moms, I think all NICU moms will relate to this. The final test was the car seat test, and which seems like such a small thing, but you have to bring your car seat and put the baby in the car seat. And they have to be hooked up to all these monitors. And I think she had to stay in there for like an hour, or it might've been like an hour or 2 hours. It seemed like eternity.
And you're sitting there having to wait and look at her during this whole time. Are you there watching her in the car seat? Like, oh my God.
I couldn't go anywhere else. I couldn't leave and go have lunch, because I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I go and have lunch and then she fails? She fails the test. Now what?
I'm thinking of the anxiety. I'm thinking of just being anxious, just sitting there watching her. You can't do anything. You're just like, yes, come on.
You can't do anything, and you're just watching and making sure, because the monitors are going off. That means that she's having either like decelerations or change in heartbeat or whatever the case might be. And if that happens, she's got to stay longer.
I can't
imagine. So, I'm watching and praying, just like, okay, we got to pass this test, baby. We got to pass it. And, I almost shared, that was one of the pictures I almost added, but she's so tiny. Like I have a picture of her taking the car seat test. You can barely even see her because she's just engulfed in
all the
car
straps
seat.
And
Yes, you could barely even see her. So I thought if I shared the picture, what even is that? That was my baby, and that little tiny.
Yeah, and our Shonda's on. She was our guest last week. She said yes, the monitors and the beeping.
Yes,
so she's
Shonda,
having flashbacks too. Yeah.
Yes, all the beeping, and every time you hear an alarm go off, you're like, oh my gosh, is that my baby going off? Gosh, I forgot about that. You reminded me.
So with
there was another question you had.
I'm like, where do we go? It's okay. We'll figure it out. We'll find our way back. But I wanted to ask, so she passes, right? She passes the test, and you guys go home. And I didn't even think of this. And again, you're bringing up, because again, even in my 2 pregnancies, nursing was, my second was an issue, but like you said, just something I took for granted. Putting them in the car seat to go home after the 2-day period or however long you kept, like little things that we took for granted. I think I love that these stories remind me that you do have so much to be grateful for. A lot of times we can easily complain about things that in the big picture don't matter, because like, oh God, you were so faithful even in that, and then but still rejoice and thank God for what he's brought your daughter from. But in your own situation, just say, I never had to go through that. I never thought of that. And I think it gives you empathy. And again, if there are moms that I do meet now that have a child in the NICU, I think it helps me be more empathetic towards them and be supportive of them hearing these stories. So again, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story with us. But I want to talk about after everything you had to go through, you eventually get your bill from the hospital to NICU. So let's chat about that a bit. What?
Okay, so here's the thing that nobody told me. You go to a hospital, you pre-register, right? You sign all the paperwork that says, yes, I'm going to deliver here. Here's my insurance information, everything else. So we had done all that. And the hospital that we selected was covered by the insurance. No problem. I had my son. I didn't get a bill, other than the copay. No problem. I get home with her. I get a bill in the 5 digits. And I'm like, what is this? I have insurance. Why am I getting this bill? And having to navigate all that, well, come to find out, this is what they don't tell you. So NICU moms, beware. The hospital is covered by my insurance, but the NICU doctors are not covered by my insurance.
Mm.
And,
Wow.
it really ticked me off because it's like, well, at that point, nobody ever told me that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it was somewhere in this thing that you signed. Oh, every doctor within the hospital might not be covered, but it really wasn't explained, and at the moment in which it's life or death, I just delivered my baby via emergency C-section. She's
Yes.
going to the NICU. I don't
Yes.
have time to say, stop, wait, hold up. Before you take her,
Right.
is that
Right.
doctor that's going to treat her in there, are they covered? Because you
Mhm.
think every doctor that works in the hospital, as long as the hospital is covered, you would think every doctor in that hospital is covered.
Wow.
And that's not the case.
Wow.
So, had to fight with the
Oh
insurance over that. And we
my.
ended up getting part of it covered, but a lot of it was considered out of network and we had to pay.
It's like another trauma on top of everything
Yeah.
you've had to go through.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have the ability to say, oh no, I don't want them to go to that NICU. I want to take them somewhere else and go to a NICU that has a doctor that's covered. Because at that point, you're just trying to save your baby's life.
Yeah. You're not even thinking in terms of that at all.
Yeah.
So as we are now talking about, you're continuing to mother, Eliana's home, EJ is home, and it doesn't end there because obviously she's born early. She is now dealing with some developmental delays. So talk about those early years, talk about those. And I remember again as well, going to the doctor's visits, and at a certain amount of months, they check off, is she doing this? You got to sit there and check off if your child is doing certain things or not. And so I know there's probably physical developmental, there's movement, motor skills, all those things. So talk about those early years and how you're, dealing with her developmental delays.
Yeah. So one thing that I learned about was a new term to me was adjusted age. So you go to the doctor, right? You take her for her, 1 month visit or 2-month visit really, because they backtrack. So they say at 2 months, she should be doing this, but she was 6 weeks early. So she's really the age of a 2-week-old. That's how they look at everything.
The 6 weeks. Yeah.
They subtracted the 6 weeks and they continue to do that for, I believe it was like the first year. So again, my frame of reference, all I really had was my son, and he was born on time. But eventually I started to notice, like you said, there were some things that I wasn't able to check off for her. There were some things, that she wasn't doing in a timely fashion, even for the 6-week adjusted age. And so, I spoke with the pediatrician about it and ended up looking into early intervention. So they came out, they evaluated her for, whether or not she was basically developmentally delayed and determined that she was. Even with the 6-week adjustment, she was developmentally delayed. And so then we had to start dealing with some developmental intervention, physical therapy, speech therapy, all of those kinds of things. And so, there just was a time of, again, worry, fear, anxiety, is she ever going to catch up? Is she going to be like her typical peers? Is this something that, that we're going to be dealing with for the rest of her life? But, luckily she caught up and, she's now 15 and nobody would know the difference at this point. Yeah, she's doing amazing.
I was going to ask you, during that time, did you, any of your friends or your circle, did anyone ever experience that with their child? Like, were you the only one that was kind of going through that and having experienced that on your own?
Yeah, I was the only one. All of my friends' circle, we all got married a little bit later, had babies a little bit later. So there was only one of my really close friends that had children that were older than mine and had not been through any of those things. And then it was me. So, and then I had another friend who had twins after me and did have a little bit of time in the NICU, but that's pretty typical of twins. They're usually born a little bit early, usually spend a little bit of time in the NICU. And I think it was just days for them and, went home and everything was fine from there. So yeah, again, I didn't really feel like I had much of a community. We talked earlier about, the internet and Facebook and everything kind of being a
Mhm.
lot different than it is now. But
Yeah.
I did start to find some communities on, on the internet,
Mhm.
of people that were having babies around the same time, experiencing, developmental delays and things like that. So that was kind of where I went, was that online community.
Now, did you have support in person? Like, what did your support, like, even during the NICU, I'd say coming home initially, again, 2 under 2, were you kind of, you and your husband shouldering this burden by yourself? Like, what did your support look like as you're, again, coming home, 2 young ones, NICU stay, healing from a C-section? Like, that's a lot. So how, and I know
Mhm.
you want to be superwoman, super mom and super wife, but what did your support look like? How did you get through that time?
Well, I'm gonna say something here that's kind of gonna sound like a little bit of an unpopular thing to say.
Mhm.
Um, I thought I would get more support from my church, and I really didn't.
Okay.
And but I think one thing that I learned is that you can't. Sometimes people don't know how to help, and
Mm.
you can't expect help if you don't ask for help. So maybe it was also, on us, to be more vocal about what we needed and how people could support. Um, so yeah, we did a lot of it ourselves. I mean, we had my mother-in-law, she lived close by, and she helped out when she could, but she was working, she worked nights. So there wasn't really a lot of help for her. Other than that, I don't really have a lot of family in the area.
Mm.
So, and my husband went back to work. He couldn't stay home too long. So, yeah, at that point, it was mostly me. My son did go to daycare during the day. So that was helpful a little bit because it just allowed me to just be with her during the day. In fact, I got a real quick funny story to share because, you always see, especially like on Facebook and stuff like that, with the older sibling comes to the hospital and they see the baby for the
Mhm.
first time and everything else. Well, because she was in the NICU, he never had the opportunity.
To
He never
come
came to
to.
the hospital and saw
Mhm.
her. And he's 17 months old. So the day that we brought her home, he was at the daycare, dropped off at daycare in the morning. My husband picked me and Eliana up from the hospital. And then we went to pick him up from the daycare. And I'm sitting in the back seat. She's in the middle. He gets in the car in his car seat and he looks over like, what
Who
the
is
heck is
this?
that? Right. Where did that come from? And my husband and I, we still laugh to this day because that look on his face, it was just total shock. I mean, because the last thing he knew, there's a baby inside
Yeah.
mommy's belly, but at
Mhm.
17 months, they don't really process that. And next thing you know, there's another little stranger in the
In my
car.
seat. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And it's interesting. I want to go back to what you said about support. And I'll tell you, we've done so many topics, and I'm even coming to mind our cancer show, where that same thing. We don't ask for help. We talked
Mhm.
about that, and I know I remember one of our guests, Libby, was on, and I just remember her, talking about that. I think Marquisha, even our guests, I think all of our guests for that show, you're wanting someone to help. You know what you need, but it's hard for us to verbalize that. And that's
Mhm.
one of the things that I'm so grateful on this show. I hopefully that those that have been regular watchers are viewing this and knowing that if you hear someone's in a hospital, not just I'm going to pray for them, like send them a gift card, send them
Mhm.
I tried to do like a DoorDash gift card or groceries or something. I know someone mentioned even parking because they have to go to the hospital every day. And depending if your hospital's in the city or doesn't have parking, you've got to pay for parking every day. There's so many different ways that you can help. And so we don't always, and we shouldn't hopefully be in the mindset of having to be asked. If you were in someone's shoe,
Mhm.
what would you do? You need to eat. I think that's the main, like you need to eat and you need your house cleaned. Certain things
Right.
like that. Those are small things that if you're ever thinking how you can help someone, especially if they're having a medical situation, the hospital, whatever, food and house cleaning and babysitting if needed. Those are
Yeah.
like major things that we can do to support those, in our communities and in our circles without having to be asked for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree. I think it kind of goes both ways. You know, I definitely think that there are things that people can just automatically just jump in and say, we can do this. But I think also, you know, again, as women, as strong women, a lot of times we don't ask
No,
for help, and it's okay. I know
it's
you
not a
asked me
sign
when I
of
was writing
weakness.
everything up, and I had a little bit of a hard time with it at first. Yeah, I had a little bit of a hard time with it at first about the words of encouragement, but that's the one thing that resonated with me. You know, it's okay to ask for help. Um,
We all need help.
you
Yes.
can't do it all. We can't do it all.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you know someone that's in your circle. And if people say, what can I do? If they ask you that, answer.
Mhm.
Don't say nothing. Don't say I'm okay. If someone says, what do you need or what can I do? You all
Right,
you could do is ask. If they can't, they can't. But there's no harm in just responding and saying, it would be nice. I need this, or can you do this?
right.
You know? So in closing, this has been amazing. Time is going so fast, but she said I'm speaking from experience. Thank you, Shonda. um, in closing, I think there's two questions I kind of want you to try to answer in one.
Okay.
Moms, we like to speak to moms at the end. So moms that are maybe comparing, I'm thinking of Eliana and maybe not being on the same level as her peers, maybe in school, daycare, whatever. What would you say to moms who are comparing their child to someone else's child and maybe not being up to par? Like the trap, like I
Yeah,
know what they say, comparison is the trap of contentment, I think, or I don't know if I'm messing that up or not, but I know comparison really, it can mess with us as moms, right? So what would you say to moms who are
yeah, I
struggling
think
with
it
constant
can, but
comparison?
I think it again, it goes back to I think we're circling back to the same thing over and over again. You know, every child is different. Every
Hmm.
pregnancy is different.
Hmm.
You know, even among siblings, and I was guilty of it. I was comparing her to what happened, you know, with her
Yeah.
brother and what he was doing, and when I was pregnant with him and everything else. But that's the beauty of children and human beings, that we are all different. So and even if she had never caught up, would it change anything about, you know,
Mhm.
the love that I have for her, or anything? No, we would just learn how to move forward with whatever cards we were dealt. So there's no perfect answer. There's no box, you
Mhm.
know. So and
And there's no
it's
perfect
funny.
there's no perfect story either, right? Like,
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned like the doctors having these like checklists. You
mhm.
know, like we need to just throw all that stuff out the window, really, because every kid is different. So why do we do this? You know?
Yeah. And then yeah, because then you qualify them, and then you feel like again something is wrong with your child when they're perfectly normal. They're perfectly the way that God created them.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you because I know when I first reached out to you, you were like, I'm only going to do this for you. So thank you for doing this for me. You were amazing. I
Oh, thank you.
appreciate you sharing your story. And again, it was even better. Again, we've known each other, I don't know, 30, at least 30 years now, but getting to know you better and knowing your story, I appreciate your transparency, sharing with our guests and sharing with your story. So everyone, LynNae's full story will be on our site tomorrow, faithfillmoms.org. Again, if you have not done so already, please leave us your email address there. You will get each story each week. Each blog will be delivered every Wednesday, and then you'll also get a preview of the next week's story along with the link directly there. So you don't have to look for us on YouTube or Facebook. You can click right in your email and find us there. So again, LynNae, thank you so much. And I invite all of our
Thank you
guests
for
to
having
join.
me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So please continue to join us this month on our show and series about premature birth. We are welcoming Tamika Lightborn next week to talk about her pre her birth story, her premature birth story for her son next week. So we invite you back to join us again, LynNae. Thank you. And to all of our guests, I hope you have a wonderful evening. God bless you and good night.
Good night.